The World Cup went from being hosted in one of the poorest countries in the world in an unfinished stadium to stadiums that cost billions of dollars. The very first World Cup was held in Montevideo, Uruguay, and it didn't cost more than a couple of $100s to organise. At the time, Europe was going through an economic depression, so a lot of the players were too afraid to attend the tournament because they would risk losing their day jobs. Yes, players used to have day jobs at the time, just like everyone else. Uruguay won the first ever World Cup, and since then the tournament has become more and more expensive. And this all started because of the war. You see, when World War II ended, a lot of football infrastructure had to be rebuilt from the ground up because, bombs, explosions, and all that stuff. So for the next World Cups, the costs were of course much higher, as they had to build everything up from scratch. The need to meet the demand for larger football stadiums became more urgent in 1947, when FIFA announced that Brazil would host the 1950 World Cup. Brazil had to spend millions to build brand new football stadiums to impress the world. But if the people from 1950 could jump into a time machine and fly to 1994, they would have to pick their jaws off the ground if they heard how much the United States of America spent on the tournament. The estimated cost of the 1994 World Cup was a whopping $500 million. And guess what? Even that World Cup paled in comparison to the next one. If I were to ask you how much more money they spent on the next one, what would be your guess? Maybe a few $100 million more. Maybe even $1 billion. Nope. The 1998 World Cup in France actually cost an estimated $2.3 billion to organise. That's over 4 times more than the last one. At this point, football had successfully become the largest sport in the world, and the World Cup had definitely proven to be a great investment for the hosting countries. So the next World Cup in 2002 cost even more, going up to over $7 billion. But then, countries realised they should probably relax a bit, as not every country was willing to risk their entire economy on a single tournament. So, for the 2006 World Cup in Germany, it only cost a measly $4.3 billion. That seems much more reasonable. And the next World Cup was actually even cheaper. The 2010 World Cup in South Africa ended up costing only $3.6 billion. But then, the next World Cup came in and broke all the records. I think we can all remember what an amazing tournament Brazil hosted in 2014, but did you know it cost them a whopping $15 billion? And the 2018 World Cup in Russia wasn't much cheaper either. It actually cost Big Vlad a whopping $11.6 billion to be able to host the tournament. But we all know the Qataris wanted to show the world what a World Cup tournament should really look like. And they definitely didn't cut back on their spending. They only ended up building 8 stadiums for this World Cup, but each one of them cost hundreds of millions of dollars to build. Ahmed bin Ali Stadium, $360 million. Al Bayt Stadium, $847 million. Al Janoub Stadium, $656 million. Al Tumama Stadium, $342 million. Education City Stadium, $700 million. Khalifa International Stadium, $374 million. Lusail Stadium, $767 million. Stadium 974, $717 million. So yeah, that's already $3 billion spent on just the stadiums. And that's not factoring in the infrastructure costs around it. Did you know they even built a whole new city? Anyways, let's just say I'm pretty sure that the amount Qatar ended up spending on the tournament, considering it isn't even over yet, the price just keeps on increasing every day, will never, ever be topped. Are you ready? According to Time USA, this World Cup is said to have cost a mind-boggling $250 billion. Yes, $250 billion. But why the hell would they have to spend 20 times more than any other country in history? Well, mainly because Qatar is a very small country with very few football facilities. For that reason, they have had to fast-track their football development, spending billions to build a new airport, hotels, roads, hospitals, and much more to accommodate the millions of people who were attending the World Cup. It's even crazier when you learn that Qatar spent about $500 million a week to fund these projects. Don't forget, that was the United States' entire budget for the tournament back in 1994. Can you guess how much they spent on their subway system alone? It was very reasonable, only $36 billion. But to be clear, all of this plays into Qatar's plan to become one of the most advanced Middle Eastern countries by 2030. So I'm not sure if we can really consider the $250 billion to be the real budget for the World Cup, but it makes for a great thumbnail and title. If you haven't been living under a rock, you know all the controversies around the tournament. And when you see the amount of money these guys are willing to spend on hosting the tournament, I wouldn't be shocked if they pushed a few billions into the pockets of Sepp Blatter back in the day to get the World Cup in the first place. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure we will never ever get clear proof of what happened back in 2010. But what do you think?